So about 20 minutes ago, my mother came to my room to discuss my little sister's birthday party, and she noticed that I was reading a subreddit. After informing her about the content of the site, she decided to tell me a story of her own. To start off, it would be wise to know that my mother was born and raised in a place in Russia near the Caucasus Mountains called Chechnya. This town was pretty crime-ridden and old-fashioned, known for its eye for an eye policy, meaning that if you killed someone, you should expect your family members and or yourself to be killed as payment. Another pretty important piece of information you should know is that my Russian side of the family was very involved in the mob. My great-uncle was one of the leaders of a powerful mob back in the late 60s. I'll ask my mom for his last name, but I think it's pretty well known, and I think it starts with a K. My mom was about 20 when she decided that she'd spend her break from medical school near the Black Sea, where she had met up with some of her friends. She decided that she'd come a day early to have fun on the beach before meeting up with her friends. However, as she was sunbathing, she fell asleep and woke up with an awful heat stroke to the point that she was going to faint. She made it to the road and hailed for a cab for a few minutes until a vehicle that looked like one of those expensive private cars rolled up. I don't know if they're widely known, but they're basically taxis that look like regular cars. Despite there already being a man in the car, my mother decided to try her luck because it was either this or she would pass out on the street. They let her in, and it seemed as though everything was going fine until she realized they drove past the hotel she was staying at. Eventually, they got off the road and started driving into the woods, and that's when my mom kind of realized that they weren't cab drivers. She had no weapons she could use. She was 5 feet tall and incredibly thin. All she was wearing was a bathing suit and a pullover dress, and she was still ill from the heat stroke, so she decided to use her words instead. I don't know if you know who I am, but I'm Kadyrov's niece, and my family's from Chechnya. You know that if you do anything to me, my family, especially my uncle, will find you and kill you and your parents and any relatives you may have. She just went on and on about her family and Chechnya's customs until the driver stopped the car and confirmed her statements, mentioning he knew some men in the army who knew her uncle and abided by the Chechen culture in the eye for an eye sense. After coming to a silent but mutual agreement, they drove her back to her hotel in complete silence, and she never saw them again.
I shall preface this following story with some relevant information. Some countries have an uncommon yet terrifying kidnapping problem, but instead of asking for ransom, the perpetrators murder their victims and harvest them for their organs in order to sell them on the black market. The buyers are typically wealthy, sickly people who would otherwise be unable to find donors. Back in the late 90s, I was around 10 years old and living in Moscow, Russia. One afternoon, I was in my grandmother's room watching the news on the television. It's not that I was watching the news to stay informed, it's that there was really nothing else to watch, except for some awful Soviet-era shows. The news described a man the police were after. He was wanted for kidnapping children and harvesting their organs. A composite sketch of the man's face was shown. I grew bored, so I telephoned to my friend to go outside and play, and we did. As the sun was beginning to set, we were walking home. The path we took was shadowy, as it was through some trees between a few condominium buildings, with hot water pipes running parallel to the path. Our building was about 60 meters from where the trees cleared and the path ended. We were always cautious about our surroundings when we were outside, especially of other people, so it just came as a habit to look behind ourselves every once in a while. But something was making me really uneasy at the moment, so I looked behind me expecting to see something, and I did. Some man was behind us, maybe around 30 meters. I thought nothing of it and looked to the front again. He seemed familiar for some reason. At that moment, I remember the composite sketch, and I was immediately gripped by fear. I glanced behind me again, and to my horror, the man was jogging towards us, closing the gap between us. I turned to my friend, but reasoned that if I panicked and just told him to run, he may have thought I was joking, or perhaps I didn't want to arouse the man's suspicion, thinking that if he noticed my intent to run, it would have given him enough time to accelerate to a full sprint. Without hesitation, I muttered to my friend, "Someone is after us. On 3, run to our building." I didn't give him time for a reaction, figuring that if he took it as a joke, then he would just think I was trying to get an early advantage in a race game, which would be ideal. 1, 2, 3. We sprinted, never looking back. I prepared the keys and hoped that I could get open the triple doors in time. The first door we kicked open, as it was the only unlocked one. I unlocked the second door and slammed it shut behind me. I entered the passcode on the next door and stumbled into the building. We immediately laughed uncomfortably since it was both thrilling and scary, much like the times when we ran from a place where we caused mischief, and that's probably what security thought, as the guard didn't believe me. I looked out of the windows and I saw no trace of the man. Could it really have been the same man from the news?
I'm 18, living in St. Petersburg, and stand at about 6'2". However, I am slim at about 155 pounds, so not terrifying, but a natural victim. My Russian is decent, but locals speaking quickly is still a little difficult to understand. 2 nights ago, I was going out to the nearest pub for a drink, and getting there involves going through an alleyway shaped like 2 L's, such that there is a point in the middle at which you cannot be seen from either road. When I reached this point, I decided to stop for a smoke before getting to the pub. I had been through this alley several times, and it's always been very quiet. A man coming from the other way approaches me and asks for a light. I offer it to him and he begins smoking. I naturally expect him to move off, but instead he just stands there, opposite me smoking. I assume he just wants smoking company, so I think nothing of it really. I will do my best to describe the guy. He was probably around 25, he stood perhaps 5'10", but much burlier than me. His longish hair and patchy stubble sent me a weird vibe almost immediately that I didn't trust. He wore heavy leather clothing, common, but the weirdest thing by far was his boots. They had fucking spurs on them. So all in all, I'm getting the feeling that this guy is a bit eccentric, but that doesn't automatically mean anything. I notice after about 10 seconds of silence that this guy isn't actually smoking. He's not inhaling the smoke at all, and it occurs to me that he had trouble lighting the thing in the first place. Again, really fucking weird. But I rationalize it and assume he must just be a relatively new smoker. He strikes up a conversation. Now I'll do my best to write a transcript here, as an English speaker would say these things, but he spoke very, very strange, something like this. "You're cool, man. We should hang out, man. I've got a cool bunch of friends I chill with. We play games and shit. You'd have fun." It strikes me as a weird opener, and I'm noping the fuck out at this point, as all these weird vibes are combining into a feeling that this guy is a bit of a creeper. I reply courteously, "Sorry, mate. Got plans." This is a lie, but out of habit to make my refusals seem more valid. He continues, "No, really, dude. You should come hang out. We have a lot of fun. A lot of fun. A lot of fun." The repetition of that last bit 3 times sends shivers down my spine. It is the bit of the brief interchange that I really remember. He's leaning in now, looking directly at me. I'm creeped and resolved to get the fuck out of there. It occurs to me that because of the way he approached, he is between me and the main alley. I make to move around him, but he lifts the fucking cigarette butt up as if to burn me with it. I said to him the equivalent of, "What the fuck, mate?" Shit gets to a whole other level here. He starts speaking super fucking quickly, far too fast for me. I picked up a few things though, stuff about his friends, and a lot of swearing at me. He finished his rant with this fucking statement. "Are you a homophobe? We like to eat homophobes." He said eat. No, not kill. Eat. How the hell did this escalate to here? I don't know whether I'm going to be raped or roasted at this point. I've had enough though. He started towards me, but I shoved him hard in the chest out of the way and booked it down the alleyway and out into the road. I think he followed most of the way, but when I looked back he was walking the other direction with his head low. I was jittery as fuck for hours, and when I talked to the barman, he said that this is kind of a weird area. A lot of gay people, and a lot of gay haters. Nasty kettle of fish, he says. This guy fucking terrified me. He singled me out in an alley, pretending to smoke in order to talk to me. Tried to invite me to something. A gangbang with his friends. Tried burning me with a cigarette butt, and then when I refused, he threatened to eat me instead. Needless to say, Russia is not for the faint of heart. My mom was about 20 when she decided that she'd spend her break from medical school near the Black Sea, where she had met up with some of her friends. She decided that she'd come a day early to have fun on the beach before meeting up with her friends. The family was very involved in the mob. My great-uncle was one of the leaders of a powerful mob back in the late 60s. I'll ask my mom for his last name, but I think it's pretty well known, and I think it starts with a K. So about 20 minutes ago, my mother came to my room to discuss my little sister's birthday party, and she noticed that I was reading a subreddit. After informing her about the content of the site, she decided, known for its eye for an eye policy, meaning that if you killed someone, you should expect your family members and or yourself to be killed as payment. Another pretty important piece of information you should know is that my Russian decided to tell me a story of her own. To start off, it would be wise to know that my mother was born and raised in a place in Russia near the Caucasus Mountains called Chechnya. This town was pretty crime-ridden and old-fashioned,